increasingly paying attention to social media channels, and that, of course,
for example, what there was on one competition, there was brought to us a Chinese city builder strategy game, and it was city builder deep in Chinese culture and history, but in the town there was no crime, no unemployment, no unhappiness. Everyone was happy and the town was great. Is that propaganda actually? Yeah, probably it is, and maybe we should look on that context as well.
I would just add maybe by opening up the aperture a little bit about how threat actors in general can use games to influence their audience. Some of the examples have already been mentioned, but one of the most fundamental ones, of course, is the narrative power of games themselves, the stories that they tell and the actions that they have the player do. Because of, I don't need to tell you, because of how the games are constructed, the player is the character in the game. So the way that you're perceiving information is different. The way that someone is almost experiencing their reality is different. So it can feel a lot more personal and leave an imprint on the cognitive space in a different way than just reading something or even watching a movie. So the narrative power is really important. So one example that comes to mind, for example, is how violent extremists use games. Both ISIS and Hezbollah created games, for example, that have the player kill Israeli civilians. You have examples where mods of Arma are misrepresenting both the battlefields in Gaza and in Ukraine. And then you have games like the PRC sponsored or PRC affiliated game that has players essentially beat up Hong Kong protesters. Those are the kinds of things that are just sort of set in the context where now a player is experiencing something that is effectively is propaganda. The other ways in which things can be affected is just the data collection that happens by the game developers themselves. So any kind of authoritarian regime that is producing a game has control over sort of the kind of censorship and self-censorship that happens as part of that.
Keep closer. For better audio quality.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I guess the room can hear me, but people online maybe cannot. So what I would say, I talk with my hands a lot, so I apologize. The kind of censorship and self-censorship that occurs because of a regime sponsoring a game is also a factor. And then the data collection that happens within, the personal data collection that happens within the game itself, the kind of psychographic profiling that can occur in the game environment of how, what players do and when they do it, and the kind of research that then can come out of that, and advertisement that can come out of that is also a factor. So So there are different lenses in which we at the Global Engagement Center look at how foreign authoritarian regimes and threat actors can use games in order to influence.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will also share some my personal observations, some observations from the community. Well, I think everyone heard the game which praises communism, released by Russia, some atomic something. And well, at that time, I think every Ukrainian YouTuber thought that they must spend at least an hour to tell, don't buy atomic heart, don't buy atomic heart for whole video. But so they tried to counter propaganda in this way, just showing that the game is propaganda. So they just Russia-funded team, they made a game which showed that communism is good, there are no like repressions, but there is technological progress and so on. And also there was also one story why Ukrainian game jammers started less participating in Ludum Dare game jam, because in 2022, at the beginning of the war, there was a Ludum Dare. We decided to take part just to when it was in October 2022, and among the entries we found a game made by Russian developers and this game is about Panzer anti-aircraft system which protects poor Russians from evil Ukrainians who want to bomb them, who want to destroy them. So we tried to explain this in the comments. We tried to show the real pictures from Russian destruction of Ukraine. But, well, this didn't lead to anything, and the Ludum Dare organizer didn't just do any actions. And, well, this happens because, well, it happened two times. Sometimes government-funded developers make games which distribute propaganda, or propagated developers, developers who are under the influence of propaganda, create more games which spread this. So it's like a rolling snowball. Yeah, so, and yes, we define that this is a thing, must be counted. So let's share some ideas, maybe existing practices, what could be done to counter propaganda games, to counter propaganda in the games. Let's we have some ideas or successful cases, unsuccessful cases.
I might have some very indirect answer. Game that helps to understand propaganda and learn how to go through. We were thinking about this question. It's very difficult. Hannah helped me. I think Bioshock series is very interesting example here. In this game, I don't know if you all know it. It's quite old game. In this game, you are in utopia and you go through levels of that utopia, discovering propaganda, discovering lies, unearthing all of it, countering it possibly, and in the end, canceling, destroying this utopia, this sect behind this utopia, and so on. So I think it's very good and important experience for people that never were in such situation, because I don't know, that they are in the happy nations of the West that never encountered anything that unpleasant, to have this because game bring us those experiences closer than movies or books are. We are more immersed in games. Yeah, so in that experience you can feel that more on yourself, that you are under this propaganda, that you have to fight it, that you have to go through it to find the truth.
Yeah, excellent point. There are, of course, many different layers and aspects you can take on this, and it's a very difficult question that many governments all over the world are at the moment looking for different answers. And of course, when we talk about policymaking, the first idea is often to regulate it. And EU has tried this with terroristic content regulation, DSA, and to some extent they have been effective, at least in a way that now the platforms are paying much more attention to what kind of content they allow on the platforms. Of course, the counter side of this is that you have to very carefully balance the freedom of arts against any kind of measures you take to protect the audience from harmful content, being it vulnerable contents like minors or general public from terrorism or something like that. And that's a very, very difficult question, and you have to do it very well. Of course, regulatory approach is not the only approach, and it's and you can take also software measures. I think one of the key topics here is the continued investment in media education, in particular game education. We need audiences who are able to identify this kind of propagandistic content and are able to place it in the right context and are able to analyze it and then reject any kind of that message they are getting through that kind of propagandist content. And that only happens if you are educated, you have information and access to the game education, media education, and you know what kind of narratives and stories there are people are trying to disseminate through some kind of a propagandistic games. And the third part, of course, is general games critique itself is often very valuable in this context because you need professionals who see this context. And let's face it, quite often the propagandistic games are also very, very, very bad games. So that might be also the one layer to make it visible how these games don't really work, even as a game, not to even mention about the propagandist nature. But yeah, there are many ways you can address these topics, and I think you need this kind of multi-layer approach to address all aspects of it. Sometimes regulation work, sometimes you need education or other measures.
Well, I think one of the previous discussion actually highlighted some of the examples of successes. And Stalker 2, of course. I haven't been one of the fortunate people that was able to download it yet, but Stalker 2 has a lot of music and cultural aspects that shows Ukraine in a different way, and that is a very subtle way, for example, to message support for culture. But in the U.S. government, the Department of State, we sort of we approach this issue from the perspective that inoculation and pre-bunking is probably the best way to get ahead of some kind of propagandistic messaging, both in games and outside of the games. So with that in mind, we have successfully developed at least 2 games that approach the subject from the perspective of teaching a player that goes through the game to recognize the signs of when they are being manipulated. It's sort of a form of digital and media literacy, but it's done in a gaming environment in which you can experience it in a different way. So Cat Park and Harmony Square are 2 games that you can play online through the browser. They've been translated and localized into over 20 languages and regional environments, and they have examples from those regions. So people who play them can relate to for example, from Russia. So that social aspect of gaming, I think it's underexplored, and we're hoping that this is going to be a really great way to approach it with resilience in the future.
I do believe we also should mention one more thing here, or on every discussion on propaganda: confirmation bias. Our brains are constructed in a ways where we do have plenty of biases that we are doing when thinking. Confirmation bias is one of strongest of them. It makes our brain to search actively for information that confirms what we are believing in, what we are thinking, and helps us to ignore any information that contradicts our beliefs and thoughts. So yeah, every Russia supporter will be looking for information that Russia is great and successful, and putting a lot of effort to ignore information that Russia has problem with toilets. Yeah, that's how confirmation bias works.
Yes, definitely. And speaking about the community, a story comes to my mind. One of the first games I played with since I got a computer was Civilization 3, and then I started looking for players online, and there were no Ukrainian forums. There was an international civfanatics.com forum and Russian forum. Well, we joined, many Ukrainian players were there. And then it happened, Georgia 2008, and at the time Russian civilization players with whom we just played games, with whom we production boost in the game, and when you are competing with
In a way that there was always this kind of constant, steady progress towards a spaceship to another planet. And well, I'm not entirely sure if we are doomed to that destiny at the moment in the humanity, but yeah, you can see that impact that you really get from the game, certain ways of thinking.
So we are at strategy and historical games. Okay, Crusader Kings 3. It's really great historical game that shows how some systems, how some effects work. Well, it's medieval times, so how it worked by then. But it's a very good example on how to explain to gamers how things were different, how some causatory things, something here caused something here different, many social problems, many equality problems are there, and they are very visible because the game portrays get them realistic. Game.
Doing the kind of work I do, it's very difficult to be surprised or be influenced, because it's always very skeptical by nature work. So you kind of get into a different trap of potentially having very little trust in the information that you're experiencing or getting through the game. But what I would say is that the games that I'd mentioned already, like Cat Park, for example, it really made me aware of some of the, even doing the work that I do, it made me aware of how easy it is to fall into a trap of manipulation, how easy it is to get worked up and respond emotionally to a particularly explosive statement and get trapped into a trolling conversation that goes on and on and on and on. So it's a little bit less about changing mind, a little bit more about sort of doing a threat model of your own biases and your own vulnerabilities and how they can be exploited because of the issues that you believe or don't believe, and it causes you support or don't support. And that's applicable, I think, both at the individual level, having that awareness of your own vulnerability to certain things, certain exploitation, and at the societal level, the kinds of fissures that a particular society has within it, grievances that it has within it that could be exploited by threat actors.
Yes, really. So about the games and observations, what they do. First, I will also mention one interesting experience. The game is called, it's a web game, We Become What We Behold. It's about society where two types of people like circles and triangles live, and you are a news reporter and you are taking screenshot of a part of the screen. Yeah, you know it, yes. And then it becomes news, and then it influences what people do. For example, if you take a shot of one triangle in a hat, then everyone starts making a hat, wearing a hat because it's a new fashion. And then you find some quarrel between triangles and circle, and then it leads to escalating type of events of internal disaster. So it teaches really well of the importance of media, and definitely really like games are a form of art, and they are more, they have much bigger effect because it's interactive. When people read books, when people watch movies, then they start thinking differently, and then with games even more. It was a great point that the games should just not just counter propaganda with another propaganda, but teach people, give immunity, just like a COVID shot, and then it will be skepticism shot, something like this. So let's discuss maybe what approaches can game have to make the player resistant to propaganda and make the player think critically, think rationally.
All questions here are difficult. Again, maybe I don't have the exact answer, but maybe games could also spread the good news and spread the things that we should believe in. We've made a new project this year with Amnesty International. We're running Central and Eastern European Game Awards for some years now, and Games Gathering is our partner there, nominating the Ukrainian games there. What we wanted this year is to extend the gala, extend the awards by new awards. Together with Amnesty International, we decided to award the games that spread the thinking about human rights, that educate about human rights, because we believe human rights are quite general. If everyone would stick to human rights, there would be way less problems around. So we had this first edition of this awards this year in Poznań on our game industry conference. So I can mention games that we nominated. Those are definitely games that you should check if you want to learn more about human rights. So there was Goodbye Volcano High, a story about self-acceptation, but also incoming global threat of extinction. There was Venba, beautiful story about migration and cultures mending together. Thirsty Sweeters about cultural approaches and acceptance. And in the end, after big discussion, we picked as the winner Baldur's Gate 3, which, well, it's huge on delivering this message, but it also has very strong message about migration or even war, escaping people that are trying to find place for themselves and are welcome or not welcome. It's a big thing in the third chapter of the game, and it's very well woven in the threads of the narrative there. It's not very eminent, but also it hits you on many places on any moment. So maybe that's an approach to make great games that spread important messages.
Yeah, just to continue that, I completely agree, because like as we all know, making good games is very, very hard thing, and making good games with impact or applied games or serious games that's first have to make a great game, and then you really have to add a layer on that that actually brings some impact. And we have seen so many great projects failing on that because they have focused too much on the idea of a serious or applied use of the game and forgotten that the game itself has to be really great. So the Baldur's Gate 3 is a good example from that perspective, that by making a great game with a great story, you can actually bring a lot of impact. Another aspect of this is also the games that really push players to think. Because there are lots of great European indie games, and also non-European, of course. Like one example is Goro Ogoa game that I played a few years ago, that has this kind of open-ended artistic game experience that has a bit of different meaning for everyone who is playing that. So sometimes just pushing the boundaries of games as an artistic medium, that is really pushing people to think by themselves, have different meanings, having these debates, what are the stories, can lead to this kind of valuable level up in your thinking and ways you see the world.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. The power of narrative and the power of storytelling in the game is probably one of the best ways to be able to bring someone subtly out of the universe that they're in and into a different universe and a different reality. It can work as a powerful tool of disinformation and propaganda, and it can also work in the opposite direction. Obviously, if the game is a good game and is a popular one, it's going to carry that power further along. I mean, we already talked a little bit about using gamification as an approach to exposing a player to how disinformation campaigns are built and what kind of emotional aspects they exploit, and with that idea, inoculating them in a way, knowing how to recognize the manipulation. And I think that that really is another aspect that the Global Engagement Center at the Department of State in the US government has done a lot of work with, but there are other opportunities there to build more of this, of games in that direction for different audiences that engage different ages and different segments of population. So I do think that this is also a promising approach.
Yes, this is really important, and we will get to the climax of our meeting. So first I want to share my favorite piece of art which teaches critical thinking. It's not a game, it's a book. It's Harry Potter fan fiction, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality by Oleksii Yudkovsky. So it has the alteration from the main timeline of Harry Potter, that Harry Potter's father is Oxford professor who taught him, who gave him plenty of books on fiction, on science, and on thinking. And often in Hogwarts, Harry Potter gives the question to himself, what do I know and why do I think that I know this? And this leads to many interesting outcomes. So I highly recommend to read it. It's also in Ukrainian and English. And well, this is why we gathered this. This game as a special interactive piece of art is very powerful. And the State Department of the United States for the year 2025 announced a grant project. It's called United with Ukraine Game Jam. And the actual Game Jam name will be Ctrl-Alt-Disinfo. And the games which will be developed at this Game Jam are aimed to teach critical thinking, media literacy, debunking and pre-bunking propaganda and misinformation. And like usually, it will be our 10th Global Game Jam in Ukraine. All the years, it was just volunteer work, just making games for fun. But now the games have chances to win main prizes, 3 main prizes, each of $200,000, and 20 mini grants of $1,000. So first, we invite all the viewers, all the attendees, YouTube viewers, to join our website, unitedwithukraine.games, The project will spread across various countries, over than 25 countries, and the prize fund is directed to Ukrainian game development teams consisting of citizens of Ukraine. And as a final remarks, let's give some advice. Indeed, this is very difficult to combine educational value and social and thinking message to the game. So what can we advise to the participants? Because right now they have about more than a month to get ready for the jam.
Me again. Okay, I think Jari already said that the game has to be doing the teaching through the game. The worst mistake that is sometimes made with the games that are supposed to be educational or serious or teaching something, that is that you have some gameplay that is maybe meaningful or maybe meaningless, but between the gameplay you get boards that you should read. No, it's not working that way. First of all, you need to make great game that will be engaging, and you have to put the learning deeply into the game mechanics, into the gameplay of the game. If it's two things apart, just being shattered and put together, it will not work. So first of all, let's make great games.
And of course, to continue on that, it's important to make great games with the great people. So it's very important for you always to build a player community around your game that is inclusive and a non-toxic and a healthy community that provides, first of all, you great feedback on you on where your game is going, but secondly, helping you in the marketing, and thirdly, moderating itself in a way that any kind of disinformation or propagandistic content is kept away from your community, and you are able to build this kind of huge global fan base on the long run. But of course, everything starts with a great game.
The beauty of going last is that everything great has already been said. I will just reinforce the message. Build a great game with a great story, with a great narrative that can engage and completely immerse the player in it, because games are unique in the way that they engage the audience. They have the power to connect on a different level with a player's brain and imprint in their experience the information that you're trying to relay. And that goes back to our origins as humans that drew pictures on walls and experienced life in a way that we no longer sometimes do. And it's really important that the myths and the narrative and the storyline engages the audience in a very special way. And I think have fun.
Thanks to our all wonderful speakers today. Yeah, we have around 8 minutes for a QA session, so I invite you to ask any questions you have to our speakers.
Propaganda as in a negative connotation, right? However, propaganda can be used to reinforce positive messages. And I think, especially in the situation our country is in right now, this might be important to reinforce the messages for people from deoccupied territories, for example, or you get it, right? So maybe it would be great to hear your opinions on how we can use some messages from the games to reinforce our political and national messages for the players to come. Thanks.
I do believe Stalker 2 is doing that job already, because it shows you can live in war-torn Ukraine and deliver a global hit that Russians will envy. So yeah, congrats on Stalker 2.
Yeah. But not just Stalker 2, like tell your stories. Like when there was a huge refugee crisis in Europe and many people were forced to left Middle East, we heard the stories through games of the refugees on that side. When there has been lots of great stories about people struggling with prejudices in a society, and they have used games for that. So it's very, very important that you empower yourself to create the games that tell your story.
Some more questions, maybe?
I would second or third the Stalker 2 endorsement. I think the way in which it subtly engages with music and culture to counter some of the historic revisionism and distortion that's coming from Russia today is really important, and more of those games should happen. I think that is in the way a way of resisting the aggression and the way of engaging the rest of the world in understanding the story of Ukraine and the experience of Ukraine today. With regards to how to engage folks in the temporarily occupied territories, they need to have the connection with their culture now more than ever, because Russians are doing everything possible to erase it there. And that culture is going into hiding, into underground. So for them to be able to have a connective tissue by playing the games with Ukrainian players, playing the game that engages and reminds them of who they are, and reinforces it in a way, it's really, really powerful. So that the experiential is the way to do it.
Yeah, I have one story. Well, obviously, so Stalker 2 is our flagship game. And, well, I think in our community, we have a story which everyone of indie game develops with small games, which you can do. What we started to do in 2022, we started to add a logo made in Ukraine on the loading screen of our games. It's a very low effort needed from the developer to add this logo, but this played a great role since 2022, because, you know, when you play a game, you don't care in which country it was made. You just play the game. But thanks to this tiny logo, millions of mobile gamers, HTML5 gamers in the world started to learn, oh, it's Ukraine, and it's not only war, it's creative people, but these creative people are suffering from the invasion from Russia. And then additional step for the indie game developers who don't have so much resources to make another Stalker 2 is to add a message into the game, like, for example, what I did in my games. I added it has an integrated games news system, which informs the players on updates, on maybe some video streams. And at the beginning of the invasion, I added news. Do you like our games? Please support our country. And this message led to United 24 page and to the page of our game dev under bombs with other volunteers. So we as game creators, we are highly socially responsible because we are delivering messages to people, and this way we help people understand what's going on and spread information.
And maybe one more thing, Stalker 2 is a flagship that you have, and it's doing huge promotion, but I would like to thank every one of you that is doing games here still. If you create jobs, if you pay taxes, that's very important, and every smallest games of the games that is being exported, because they are exported also as well, every single one of them helps, so that's for you.
Any other questions? We also have 3 minutes. It's like for one question, small. Okay, no. So I have a question, if you wouldn't mind. What do you think if games based on true story works better than games like just in fantastic words with some propaganda of Ukraine? As Stalker, I mean, Stalker is like based on true story, but there are a lot of fantastic things in this game. What do you think? Which kind of games work better?
I would say the story that players can immerse in and connect with work best. If the story is based on true story or not, I would say it's secondary. The quality of the narrative is primary goal here. You don't agree?
Completely agree.
It's like the analogy of films, right? Do you connect with a science fiction film better or worse than with a documentary, right? Either one, both of them have a different purpose, and a documentary about your experience you will connect with in a different way. But science fiction, for example, has a way of building a world that has universal messages in it of truth, of empowerment, of right and wrong. And games can do very similar things. I think it's what the story is and what the message is that is really important.
I'm sorry, but I I feel that it's necessary to comment. So because it comes to our previous event here on propaganda. And I think that it is very important, this conversation is very important, because around this even word termed propaganda, because some of our colleagues, friends, they're pretty sure that propaganda, there's good and bad propaganda. So I think that we should definitely understand that propaganda is not good, because it's based on fake information, on manipulations, on something not truth. So I think that this conversation, we should come, and return to it again and again to understand the ethical roots and the ethical grounds of all this work. And I like the name of this discussion panel: propaganda, spreading, countering, and educating. So, and in your presentation, thank you very much for that. You stressed that education, that providing truth information, telling good story. So let's go away from this term propaganda and use educating, promoting, advocating. But that is what we should work with, and use these true stories and not fake stories. So that is very important. And to my mind, this conversation is very important for our young audience. And I am, to tell the truth, very surprised that our young colleagues, they perceive propaganda as positive term. So for me, it's out of the question. I mean, so let's discuss that, and it is important to my mind. And thank you for this conversation, for this presentation.
Do you have any comments?
I would say in this part of the world, propaganda and experience with propaganda is very, very specific. It was always negative, because we have come out of the legacy of the USSR that has used propaganda in a negative way. And I agree with you that I think it's really important to keep an eye on that context culturally. Nations use information to promote themselves. And sometimes that is, I think, what our colleagues mean by good propaganda, promoting the message of a nation. It could be, we can call it something else. We can call it messaging. We can call it strategic communication, because that is really what it is. It's promotion, yeah, but it should be truth.
If I may, taking the responsibility for the person who used the term good propaganda. So I believe that right now our country is in a war with a nation who has strong and long experience with propaganda and using it to pursue their goals. So we have to know how to operate with a weapon that our opponent is proficient with. So that's because we have to use propagandistic methods to promote truthful messages. And that I would like to stress that I would use the term good propaganda in that term. So truthful messages with strong delivery. Yeah, thank you.
Just one remark which comes to my mind. At the panel of games, I'm talking about books, but I can't help talking. One of my favorite writers is Terry Pratchett. And in the book Truth, it was a phrase, maybe is originated from real world, but a lie will run around the globe while the truth is still tight in the laces. But when the truth will tie the laces, it will kick the lie. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. We're out of time, unfortunately, now. So I invite you to the coffee break.